Wilson, and welcome to this week's live weekly webinar for the Investor Agent Training Program, and welcome aboard to those of you who've been in through the Flipping for Profits program and the Rental Profits Without the Pain, which is how to buy flips and how to buy rentals. Okay, if you are brand new, a little bit of protocol. This is live, and now it's being recorded. And if you have questions, please type them in your question box. We'll get to them, and we will clear out all questions before we're done tonight. So we're going to take the questions, and we're going to get into the content, which tonight has everything to do with property management. Okay, then we'll wrap up with more Q&A, more questions, and I'll tell you a little bit about what's coming up next week, and then we'll wrap it up. Basically, get the recording downloaded, and then upload it again so that Beverly can send it out to everyone tomorrow. So back to a little bit of house cleaning here. If you are new, start with the question box. From time to time, I might unmute you, okay, so that you're live audio. We haven't done that for a while, but sometimes we do. And when it comes to property management, we usually get a lot of input, feedback, questions, because it's just, it's inevitable. I mean, if you're helping landlords or you're a landlord yourself, stuff's going to come up, and this is not, it's a relationship business. It's a human relations business. And what I mean by that is, perfect example, when someone is renting from you and they go through one of life's challenges, loss of a job, divorce, death in the family, even positive things, marriage, having children, you are brought into that because you're providing housing for them. So it's just inevitable that at some point you're going to have some involvement. Everybody reacts differently. The bottom line is you're a business person. You're in a for-profit business. Okay? If you want to be charitable, you can do that through your business, but it's better to be profitable in your business first, and you can be charitable in your on a personal basis. Okay? When I learned that lesson years ago, it made all the difference. Okay? So you can have a nonprofit business. It's just typically people don't get into property management to be a nonprofit. So in any case, last week we went over a few things, basically marketing and advertising, screening, what areas do you want to operate in. It's the same, when you're looking to buy rentals, it's the same philosophy you use for that as what you use when you're looking to manage properties for other people. You want to make sure you're in the good areas with a lot of good rentals and a lot of good tenants. Okay, and there are ways to do that. We showed you some of that last week. And tonight we're going to get into Section 8, charitable organizations, an actual lease, smokers, pets, and things like that. Okay, so let's do this. Let me check for questions here real quick before we get started. If you do have questions, please type them in as you have them. So, because I'm going to slide my control panel back and forth, and we'll get into the questions in between each section. Okay, so first section that we're going to jump right into is Section 8. Go ahead and write in your notes, Section 8. Now, up in Canada, it's different. Canada does have a welfare system in place, and there are subsidy programs for tenants who need a subsidy. And fundamentally, all the principles are the same. It's just the terminology may be different. Okay, but fundamentally, Section 8 refers to the person, not the property. All right. Now, I will tell you this right out of the gate. I've got some pretty strong feelings about Section 8. It used to be a good program. I think in principle, it still can be a good program. Okay. However, the rules have changed over the years, and particularly in the larger cities, the management of those Section 8 houses, which is part of HUD, by the way, in the States it's part of HUD, all right, have changed the rules so that they've taken more and more rights away from owners, okay, and it's become troublesome. I mean, just going to you can read this information if you want and see that I've got some stronger feelings towards it. But I'm going to be a little bit neutral tonight. I will tell you, it's fundamentally, in principle, it is a good idea. Okay, it's just that, just like a lot of other government programs, once it's been out for a while, it tends to attract abuse, fraud, and mismanagement. And it just seems to, I hope I'm not offending anybody, by the way. When I was a child, I lived in low-income housing. All right. So what I'm speaking about here is government management. So maybe I'm not offending any government employees here. All right. But what happens is there's so much overhead and there's so much waste. It is just unbelievable. But the bigger problems have been about, I would say, between 10 and 15 years ago, Section 8 started changing how they determine what rents are. They used to use market valuations, and they still do in most cases. But when it came to single-family homes, they determined that even though a single-family home would rent for more than an apartment, 3-bedroom house, single-family house would rent for more than a 3-bedroom apartment, they decided to lower the rents that were approved for owners on the single-family homes because they said that renters in those single-family homes would pay more for utilities, which is true. Okay, but the bottom line is that the market is what determines the fair value of something. The market is what determines the fair rent. Okay, if somebody has to pay higher utilities, it's part of the game of renting a single-family home. Well, in the government's infinite wisdom, they decided to lower what they would give owners of single-family homes in the way of rents for what their tenants would receive in the way of subsidy. And a lot of owners got out of the Section 8 business. They just stopped renting to Section 8 people because of that, and I was one of them. They also made it so that while years before, if a Section 8 tenant did not pay you, let's say they paid a portion of rent, in some cases the government will pay it all. In some cases the government will pay a portion, and the tenant pays a portion. This is the legal part of it. I know people were doing it illegally too, but legally speaking, it used to be if the tenant didn't pay their portion, all you had to do was file a complaint with Section 8, and Section 8 would remove that person the tenant from a Section 8 program until they made good on their debt. Well, they no longer do that. Okay. It also used to be if you evicted a tenant because of damages to the apartment, you could get it paid for. Now Section 8 looks for you, the owner, to repair the property before you can rent it to another Section 8 tenant, even though a Section 8 tenant actually caused damage. It's just the most crazy. It just became too troublesome, and I get out of it. Okay. I will tell you though, I know investors who do quite well with Section 8 tenants. In fact, one of the most famous people on the planet, Robert Kiyosaki, when it comes to real estate, that is, made a fortune buying and renting low-income housing, right? So you can certainly do it. The good news is, yes, they will supply you with tenants. You don't have to do a lot of marketing. However, you still have to screen them. In fact, you should be writing this down. You absolutely have to screen Section 8 tenants just like you screen anybody else. Just because the government is paying, even in some cases, all of their rent, it doesn't matter. You still got to screen those people to make sure that they're good qualified tenants for your rental properties. Okay, so keep that in mind. No matter what you do, you always screen these folks like you screen everybody else. Check out prior landlords, current landlords, prior landlords. Look at their rental history. If they have it, they do have income. Check out their job history. All of those things. All right. So, in any case, Section 8. Any questions on Section 8? I don't want to get into a lot of details here because you can read all about it yourself. I'm just going to give you some basics. Matter of fact, one of the basics is when you lease a unit to a Section 8 tenant, the Section 8 office in your city is going to send out an inspector to inspect your property. Inspection used to be very, what's called a mild, very low-key inspection. Over the years, it became far more stringent. The inspection was far more strict, and they would ask you to take care of things prior to the new Section 8 tenant moving in. And some of those things I would consider cosmetic, not structural, not health, not safety related, but cosmetic. And again, I started drawing the line. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna, put in carpet in this unit because the carpet in it is fine the way it is. It would rent fine on the open market. I don't have to change it to rent to a Section 8 tenant. So that's an example of what I'm talking about. The rules and regulations became far more strict. But in any case, you have to go through an inspection. And then once the property passes the inspection, That paperwork gets turned in, and then the office would process that, the lease, the tenant's application, and basically approve your unit to be rented to a Section 8 tenant, and at the same time approve them for renting the apartment. You will get a notice that you're going to be paid from Section 8, and you may have to wait 2 or 3 months for your first payment, although they always make good on it, and they make it retroactive if they don't send your first payment out for quite a while. So just bear in mind, you will get your money. But here's the bigger challenge, though. Let's say you have a deposit from a Section 8 tenant. The inspection comes back, they don't pass it, and you don't feel inclined to make the repair. You've held your property off the market, could be for 1 or 2 or even 3 months. So you see what I'm saying? Section 8 just has some inherent issues and some drawbacks for owners. And if you buy your properties the right way, you shouldn't need to offer them up to Section 8 tenants, unless that's your game, like Robert Kiyosaki. I'm not saying you can't make money doing it. You surely can. It's just that you're going to be giving up a lot of ownership rights to be able to do that. Okay. In any case, let's move down here. When it comes to, so another thing about Section 8 is when it comes to rent raises, you typically have to notify the Section 8 office months in advance. And often I've heard people tell me they have to notify the Section 8 office 6 months prior to a lease renewal of the owner's intent to raise rents. Okay, and that's okay. You can do that. But what I saw happen is the Section 8 office would lose that paperwork in that 6-month interval, and then the anniversary date comes up. Your new lease renewal gets approved with the old rent. They send the paperwork through, and they start sending you the checks in the subsequent year. You realize your rent raise didn't go through, and you call and ask them. They'll say, well, we have no record of any paperwork on that. And you'll say, well, I sent it. Even if you could prove you sent it, the fact is you've already passed the renewal date, and they're going to make you wait again another year. I saw that happen a number of times. Just incredibly frustrating. But just know the rules that you've got to send your rent increases in sometimes up to 6 months in advance. And what I would do is, and there's another pain in the neck, instead of sending it through the mail, you can send it through the mail with a return receipt, where it's basically certified. You get a signature upon receipt of delivery. But that person who signs it may be a front desk clerk who may or may not be working there by the time your renewal date is up. So what I like to do is I like to go in person. Okay, this is what I used to do, big pain in the neck, take in several with me at the same time, not just one, but maybe a couple dozen, and tell them make an appointment with a Section 8 officer and hand deliver them to them and get a receipt written where every single lease and tenant and property is identified, and have them initial each one as having received your request, okay, in person, and you keep that with you, and that's your proof, all right? Still doesn't mean you're going to get it. It's a way for you to eliminate some of the nuisance headaches that happen. Okay. So in any case, as you can see, just like anything in life, there's good and bad to this program, and I've probably painted a pretty dismal picture, but quite frankly, that's what it was like. Okay. So I'm not going to pull any punches. I'm going to tell you what it was like. I'll tell you can and will make money, but if you want to have a lot more work on your hands, a lot more headaches, and a lot more paperwork, and a lot more frustration, go ahead and have at it. Okay. Okay. So let me see here. We've got the charitable organizations next, and before I go there, I just want to double check and make sure everything is okay, because I saw a message come through, and I think it was from Joe. Let me go back here real quick. So Joe's saying the audio fading in and out. Okay. I'm a flaming rebel, and you're not offending me. That's Rhonda. Hey, Rhonda. You know what? And the funny thing is, it really has nothing to do with being conservative or liberal. I grew up in that environment, and I'm grateful for having things like Goodwill clothes and school lunch programs. Somebody's level of affluence doesn't determine whether they're a good or a bad person. In fact, I know plenty of low-income people who are awesome people, and I also know plenty of people who are affluent who just quite frankly are jerks. What I've discovered is money will simply inflame or enhance or accentuate who you are as a person, just like drugs or alcohol will. Okay, money will. If you're a good person, money will make you better. If you're not a good person, money will make you not such a nice person to a nth degree. So in any case, thanks, Rhonda, for your comments here. And I used to sell, by the way, I was involved in the program. We would actually sell single-family homes to Section 8. It was typically single mothers. They were basically targeted for the program. Single mothers were targeted. And I sold homes to single mothers in Section 8 program. And it worked great a couple of times. And all of a sudden we realized the program wasn't delivering as much as we thought it would. And we found out that a lot of Section 8 tenants, even though they would apply for it and do the paperwork to buy a home, a lot of them would get cold feet and back out at the end. And the comments are almost all the same. They would say, I didn't want to give up my guaranteed rent coming in. I didn't want to give up my guaranteed subsidy because, see, when they buy a house, at a certain point, they're going to be they own the home and they have to make payments on it. And they have to repair it and maintain it and everything. They don't have to do that when they're renting. Okay, the landlord is responsible for refrigerators and stoves and heating and air conditioning and all that. Okay, when a Section 8 person moves into ownership program, they become responsible for all those items, and a lot of them would back out when they found that out, and it was a shame because we were helping people live the American dream. So in any case, I could go on and on about that. I'm kind of an oddball when it comes to politics. I think there should be little or no government. I think everybody should, be inspired and driven to create and grow and develop and succeed and be producers. At the same time, I love animals and hug trees and all that neat kind of stuff too. So go ahead and try to figure me out. Anyways, back to the program here. Let's look at charitable organizations, guys. All right. In general, there's a lot of them out there. There's the Jewish community centers. There's Catholic charities. And all of them, to one degree or another, will provide temporary subsidies for people in need. Okay, a lot of times they're members of their church or they're members of the community, and they'll provide rent for 1 month, sometimes maybe 2 months, sometimes 3 months. They also will help sponsor families from foreign countries. And I've done that. Back in the late 90s, I helped sponsor families from Bosnia. Bosnia was a war-torn country back then. And the last several years, I've been helping to sponsor families from Burma and Nepal. In fact, one of my large apartment complexes is about 80% tenant occupied by refugees from Burma and Nepal. So now I like these programs because they're typically private, so they're well run, they're well managed. Again, I know that sounds like I'm slamming government agencies. I don't mean to do that. I'm just being factual. Their organizations that are run privately are far more efficient. They're faster. More funds get out to those who are in need. So in any case, what I'm getting at here is, if you have a tenant fall on hard times, don't be surprised if somebody calls you from one of these organizations and offers to pay a month's rent. I think you should do it. In the beginning, I used to be worried about that, thinking, well, I don't need the money. The tenant needs the money. Why I don't feel compelled to take this money from this organization. And I realized I'm cheating the tenant. And the tenant may have just fallen on hard times on a temporary basis, loss of a job, injury due to an accident or surgery, something like that. So I learned, and I was told by other people, no, when someone offers you, to pay a tenant's month's rent because they fell behind, you do it. And what happens is you end up getting on these people's lists, and they think of you as a good landlord because they realize you're taking care of your place, you're a good human being, and you're a great landlord, and if you operate with compassion, but you're also a for-profit business. So you get on their good list, and they actually will call you with referrals of other tenants. Maybe there's a divorce situation or a situation where a woman was in a home for a shelter for battered women with children, and she's now back out in mainstream society with a job and so forth. I'm like, bring them on. In any case, they also help sponsor all these refugee families. So it's a great way to leverage your vocation as a landlord to serve others. It's a form of ministry, if you will. And it turns out when I've done that before, guys, my profits actually went up. Okay, not just because I'm taking these subsidies, but because the people they're sponsoring ended up being pretty darn good tenants, and they always paid their rent on time. It was the most amazing thing. So, in any case, I love these charitable organizations, the private ones. Again, well run, well managed, very efficient. Make all the funds really get into the hands of the people who need it. You should keep a list of them, because if you have a tenant call you directly sometime and they'll tell you, say, look, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent next month. My child's been in the hospital. I lost my job. My spouse left me. Whatever the case is, if you believe that they're doing their best to make good, give them the list of the charitable organizations and have the tenant call them directly and get the interview. All right, you might be able to save somebody and keep a good tenant in one of your rentals. Okay, so in any case, bottom line is I like these guys. All right, I love charitable organizations. There's a bunch of them out there. There's local community level ones. There's some that are just run simply from the local churches. There's national and international organizations. At the end of the day, the bottom line is this: you have to, you've always heard the saying, it comes from the Bible. There's actually, whether you're Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Jewish, or Christian, this lesson is almost in all the scriptural writings, which is, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man a fish, he eats forever. Well, the bottom line is that it actually sometimes takes both. Sometimes people do need to learn how to fish, but at that moment in time, they quite frankly need a fish. So my philosophy has always been a little bit of both. Give them the helping hand they need right now, lift them up, and then be there for them long term. That's teaching them how to fish. So in any case, that's my philosophy there. Work with the charitable organizations, help them provide the fish, but also help them teach people to fish. In any case, that's my preaching moment for tonight. Let me go check for questions here. Let's see. We got one from Faisal. Hey, Faisal, how you doing, buddy? By the way, everybody, Faisal and I got to meet for dinner the other night. It was pretty awesome. Up on Long Island, we had Chinese, had a great conversation, and he's a valuable member of the group now. So thanks, Faisal, excuse me. And Faisal says, how do you find these organizations? I tell you what, man, they literally, you can Google them. You can Google Jewish Community Center, Catholic Charities, St. Vincent de Paul Society. If you belong to a church or mosque or synagogue, I would go there, and during normal business hours, by the way, and go to their administrative office, and ask them if they have a representative for people who are in need, financial need, and what is the process they go through, and who's the contact. So I would start there. Also, if you go to, you can actually call your city's housing office, and sometimes they'll have a list for you. But it varies from city to city, Faisal. But I can tell you, wherever I've operated, they're out there. You can actually even go and look in the phone book, go to Yellow Pages online, and just go under charitable organizations, and you'll see tons of them out there. So that's probably the first place to start, as well as go to if you're a member of a church or mosque or synagogue, whatever the case may be, start there. Okay, so I'll Google it, keep your list. I mean, I could give you a list, but quite frankly, they're just going to be different wherever you go. The list I would have would be for the cities I operated in. But Google it and then check with your local church. Sometimes even your library would have something like that, or you can go to your local food bank. You can also go to your local Red Cross, Salvation Army, and oftentimes they will have a list of the other organizations in the area, because a lot of times they collaborate and work together. So remember that about Red Cross and Salvation Army. Oftentimes they do collaborate with other organizations. So good question. Okay, let's see here. You're welcome, Faisal. Let's see here. What else? Oh, Faisal, I did send an email to Tio, and I think you saw that one, and I sent one to the M1 group, Daniel Chang up in Toronto, Ontario, and I think you got that one too. So it should be. So let me know how those two things turn out. That would be wonderful. Okay, let's talk about leases, guys. Now, we could do one of two things here. I could literally go through a lease line by line, I don't think you guys want me to do that. We'd be bored to tears and we'd be here till 3 o'clock in the morning. What I could do is give you some highlights, which is what I think I'll do. And every one of you, I believe on this call, let me go back here and check the attendee list. I believe every one of you is a licensee. Actually, two of you are not licensees. But what you can do is if you're in the investor agent training program, you probably came in as a partner then with a licensee. Ask them to go to their MLS system or the local board's forms online and give you that state's version of the lease. I've got them all. And I have one I use as an example. I think it's from Virginia. But Virginia's is going to be completely different than New York's. And Pennsylvania will be completely different than Florida. All right? I mean, I've seen them all. So what I want to do is go over some highlights, though. And one of the key things I want you guys to remember is this. My gosh, this is so important. Don't use one of those leases that you get off the internet that's not pre-approved from the state board of realtors, from the state board of real estate. Okay, very, very important. I'll explain that here in a minute. Okay, so you always want to get the lease that's available to you that's approved from your state board of realtors, and the reason that is it's already pre-approved all the way up to the state Supreme Court level. I've yet to find a state or a province where that's not true. If they're pre-approved, that means they're pre-approved all the way to the state Supreme Court level or province. All right. Now, you know, things are different between U.S. and Canada. I know because, I mean, I'm in Canada right now, actually. I'm in Ontario. And what's happening is the rules are changing, but up till now, up till recently, it was the strangest thing. Very difficult to get a broker's license up here, and actually a realtor's license, excuse me. We call you all brokers. But to manage properties, anybody can manage properties for anybody else. I mean, you didn't have to have a license. It's the strangest thing. They're working on rules to change that. But down in the States, in order to manage properties for more than one other person, you actually have to have a license. And if you're not a broker, if you're a realtor, you've got to have your license with a broker who approves it. And you've got to have errors and omissions insurance that'll cover it. Number of things you got to have in place. Okay, that's why we have a separate program just for this. But in any case, back to the lease. It's imperative that you use the forms that your local board of realtors gives you. It's through your state realtors organization or province, okay, and ultimately part of NAR. They are pre-approved. They are considered neutral leases. In other words, they're a neutral contract. They don't lean one way or the other, one way towards tenants or one way towards owners. They're fairly neutral. They are often designed so that every step of the way there are elections that have to be made that both parties have to agree to. So you make the election, both parties have to initial it, and you sign, at the end of the document and so forth. So they're fairly neutral, but they're also very, very thorough. Okay, everything is covered in there. And if you're thinking, well, I want a lease that's pro-owner or leans towards me and my rights, I understand that, but I'm going to show you how to make your lease more favorable to you. So just give me a minute. Let's just walk through this step by step. All right. So let's say you do get a lease that's not one that came from your board. Okay, you got it from some company off the internet. The challenge is if you go to court with that lease, and almost every courtroom in the U.S. and Canada, if it's not one that's pre-approved, and more importantly, it does not meet the plain language laws, the residing judge at that courthouse can reject your lease. And they say, you know what, I don't recognize this lease. You've got to go back and start all over again, and you're in deep trouble. So I would not use any of those leases. You might think that they're pro-owner, and they certainly may be. And you may even have judges that'll allow them in their courtroom because they're in writing. But the reality is the judge has the right to say, and by the way, real estate, just so you know this, is the only form of contract law that is required to be in writing to be enforceable. What that means is, yes, you can have a real estate agreement, a lease or a sale that's not in writing, it's verbal or oral, and if everything goes well, everybody's happy, you're both in agreement, both parties. But if there's a disagreement and it goes to litigation, in other words, it goes to court, just bear in mind, if it's not in writing, it's not real, and the judge will say, simply raise your hand and say, I can't hear this case because real estate contract law is required to be in writing. And if it's not in writing, it ain't real. So keep that in mind. All right. In any case, back to the lease. Always use your board's forms no matter what. Yes, they're neutral, and they operate based on election. You get to elect what you want to do in your lease. At least there's usually options every step of the way. Who pays the water? Who pays the sewage? Who pays the electrical? Who pays the gas? How much is the deposit? How much is the rent? What's the length of the lease, the term? All those things are electable, and then you and the tenant both sign, initial each change, each election, and also both of you sign the final signature page. Okay, so in any case, just bear in mind that if you decide to use any other type of lease other than what's approved by your state, you're taking your chances, right? You're putting the fate in the hands of a judge potentially, who may not look upon that, whatever that lease is, favorably, right? We got a question here. Hang on one second here. This is from Ron Gage. In my area, United Way keeps a list of all these charities. Well, that's right, Ron. You're right about that. In fact, Ron, everywhere I've been, United Way does the same thing. United Way actually is sort of a conduit amongst all the different organizations in almost every city. So thanks, Ron, for sharing that. Okay. All right, I'm going to reduce my panel, guys, so I can have more control over my screen here. Let's see. Let me move on here. I've talked about the reasons why you use your board's leases versus the ones you get off the odd internet sites, right? In any case, next subject here. Still on leases, but something that's going to make you all feel a whole lot better right now, okay? Even though I do recommend you use your board's leases, okay? There is something you can do to help give yourself a little more rights and a little more protection as a landlord and or property manager. In other words, if you're a property manager, you're representing the landlord, you're representing the owner of the property. And what that is you can create a list of rules and regulations that pertain to your particular rental property. And we provide that to you. In fact, if you guys emailed one of the book last week, I don't know if Beverly sent that out or not. Maybe she did. If she did, you guys all had this already. But it's a list of rules and regulations that I came up with years ago that you can attach to your lease, all right? And it covers everything. Water beds, alterations to the unit, drugs, firearms, dangerous hazardous conditions, changing locks, keys, all that kind of stuff, what guests you can have, how long they can be there, all that type of stuff is in there, all right? You can see there's probably, 19, 20 items, right? What you can do is there in your lease and all the leases, there's a field you can elect that says rules and regulations apply, and you refer to this as an attachment, like attachment A or addendum A, okay? And you attach this to your lease, and you and your tenants both initial and sign it. And this is where you cover all kinds of neat things, like tenants keeping the utilities on at all times, right? In other words, if they get a utility turned off because they didn't pay the utility bill, this is now they broke part of the lease. This is part of the lease. And you can ask them to leave, either get the utility current or vacate and free up the apartment. And if they don't, then you can evict them, just like you can evict them for not paying you. So you see what I'm saying, guys? Let me repeat that. You should include rules and regulations that apply to your properties that you're either owner or managing for others. And the one example I just gave here is a good example of why you want to do that. If a tenant violates anything that's part of the lease, whether it's in the main body of the lease or an attachment, in this case, a set of rules and regulations, you can evict them just for not paying utility, just like you, or if they had a utility cut off, you can evict them just like you can evict them for damaging your unit or not paying the rent, okay? Another example would be, let's say you're renting a single-family home, and of course all utilities are separate and unique for that single-family home. some of those utilities may be lienable, like water and sewage and garbage. So instead of you having the tenant put those bills, those utilities, in their name because they're lienable, you keep them in your name. And what you do is, as you get invoiced from the water authority, for example, you pay the bill because the bill's in your name, and then you invoice the tenant, and you have them reimburse you for that water bill, just like they pay you for rent. If they don't reimburse you, two advantages you have is, number one is the water is in your name, you've kept it current, you know what's going on, all right? And if they haven't paid you, if the tenant hasn't paid you for that utility, you now can evict them because you had it written in your rules and regulations it's part of your lease. So you follow what I'm saying here? In most municipalities in North America, if you allow a lienable item to be put in the tenant's name, like water, sewage, or garbage, which is typically lienable, and they don't get paid, you might not know it for months. I mean, I've seen people in cities where they didn't know for greater than a year that the water wasn't being paid. All of a sudden, the tenant moves out, the water's shut off. In order to get it turned back on, you, the owner, have to bring that water bill current because it's lienable. If you don't pay it, the property gets lien. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, guys. This is how you protect yourself and your owners from these situations by having a set of rules and regulations that are attached to the main body of the lease. Okay? All right. Now let me bring my panel back over here and look for questions. I just gave you a handful there, and some of you probably just had a lot of light bulbs go off. So hang on one second. Okay, let's bring this over. Let's see. Okay, hey, we're good on questions. All right. By the way, if any of this stuff is freaking you guys out, raise your hands and let me know. There's a lot of things we learned over the years when it comes to owning and managing rentals. A lot of things. I mean, that was mainly how I built my fortune, was through the rental business. And I actually enhanced my bottom line by managing properties for other people. Huge business, okay? Okay, I'm going to keep moving on here. Let's go into security deposits. Very sensitive subject. In fact, a lot of judges will tell you the most common case they hear in landlord-tenant law has to do with security deposits, okay? Maybe you kept some of the security deposit when a tenant moved out because you had to repair some damage. And the tenant files a complaint. They go to court and files a landlord-tenant complaint against you because you kept a portion of the deposit they didn't think you should keep. And they see things differently than you see things. And you go to court, and a judge is going to look at everything and determine, did you have a right to keep some of their deposit? And if so, how much? He's going to try to make that judgment. That's why they call them judges. Because maybe the issue isn't whether you could keep some of the deposit or not. Maybe that's not the disagreement. The disagreement may be how much. Okay, most common form of landlord-tenant case law there is, and then rents are, unpaid rents are behind that, and then damages and so forth and so on. Okay, now fundamentally, when it comes to deposits, guys, I highly encourage you to get as much upfront as you possibly can. Okay, in some states, there's a 1957 Landlord-Tenant Act. All right, and every state was allowed to interpret that their own way. So you'll see states with a 1991 version, all different kinds of versions. But fundamentally speaking, in some states you're allowed to collect more than one type of deposit. And this is what I'm going to talk about, all right? So I know a lot of people make the mistake of saying, I'll collect a deposit equal to 1 month's rent. And they'll think they're doing a good thing, and I used to do the same thing. The challenge is with that is, a lot of tenants at the end of the year when their lease is up and they look to move, they'll just say, oh, I won't pay my last month's rent because you've already got my deposit. And there ain't a whole lot you can do about it because by the time you go to court, they will have already moved on, and you're just throwing good money after bad. And yet they may have left there without actually cleaning, or maybe they left garbage behind. I mean, all kinds of stuff can happen. So in some states, you can collect a full deposit equal to 1 month's rent. You can also collect first month's and last month's rent in advance. And the reason you would do that is let's say the end of the year comes, they're not going to have the crazy idea, hey, I'll go ahead and move out and not pay my last month's rent because this guy already has my deposit. Guess what? You only has your deposit. You've also got a prepaid last month's rent, so you're covered. So that's a really good, if you're in one of those states, kudos to you. You can certainly do that. And by the way, all the states are easy to find. They're all part of your state board of realtors. In other words, the legislation is all part of the information they provide you. But in any case, back to the deposit. In other states where they say you can't collect the equivalent of 1 month's rent in deposit, and you at the same time also collect first and last months in advance, what you can do is say, okay, I'll collect 1 month's deposit equal to 1 month's rent. And by the way, yes, you do get your first month's rent paid in advance of them moving in. You always get deposit and first month's rent at a minimum, always paid in advance. Don't ever let somebody move in saying, hey, I gave you a full deposit, here's half month's rent, I'll pay the other half and when I get paid next week. Don't do it. They don't move in until everything is paid in advance. Okay? Now back to what I was describing. What I learned to do is you don't just look at the law and see what it says, you look at the law and see what it doesn't say. So what we used to do is this. We would collect 1 full month's rent in advance and then another full month's rent that would become the deposit, put that in a separate escrow account. We'll talk about that here in a second. And that would be for indemnity. In other words, indemnities indemnify you against them not paying their last month's rent or they damage the apartment or whatever the case is, okay? I would also collect another half a month's rent and call it a cleaning deposit, okay? Because a lot of times I noticed that what people were doing is they would leave and take all their stuff with them, but they wouldn't clean. I mean, the bathroom would be filthy, the kitchen would be filthy, and the carpets needed to be clean, and you got to cover all that. And let's say there was some damage, all right? Or let's say they didn't pay the last month's rent. You're not going to have enough to cover all that cleaning and all the repairs and all that. So you would collect, in best case scenarios, first and last month's rent. Of course, the last month's rent is actually rent. It does go towards rent. You would collect a full month's deposit for damages, and you would also collect a half month's rent for a cleaning, as called a cleaning deposit. And you have a separate cleaning deposit agreement, a separate cleaning deposit description that tells you what is expected to be cleaned at the end of the lease. And all of that goes into a separate account called an escrow account. Okay, but I want to make sure everybody understands what I just described there in the way to deposit. So you want to get as much in the way of deposits as you possibly can. All right? That's more protection for you and your owners. All right? So all those deposits have to be held in an escrow account, separate from your operations account. Okay? Now, when the tenant moves out, you've got to pull those funds out of that escrow account to reimburse the tenant for the deposit for any portion that they're entitled to, right? And if you keep any portion of it, you should take pictures of the damage or the filthiness that you used the money to cover, all right, and also a written description. And if you have receipts where you paid a third party like a vendor, or you paid for supplies, you've got to provide receipts for all those items as well as labor costs. And you have to send that to the tenant with a letter explaining, hey, you had $1,000 on deposit, I kept $500 and here's why. And you give an itemized list of what you kept and why with proof of payment, the vendors, the fund, the supplies, everything, okay? Now, in most states, you've got to do that in 30 days. From 30 days after the day the person moves out, you've got to not only do your inspection, you've got to have everything itemized as far as what has to be done to the place. And, if you're going to keep any portion of the deposit, you've got to show paid receipts, right? Some states is 45 days, but in most cases it's 30 days, all right? So keep that in mind. When it comes to interest on the deposit, the bottom line is this: you don't have to start accruing and paying interest till after the end of the second year. So let's say somebody's been there 2 years. At the end of the second year, you have to begin tracking accrued interest, and I would never pay it out. Some owners and landlords construe that to mean that every year they've got to pay it out, pay the interest on the deposit back to the tenant. I don't agree. My understanding is I will accrue the interest, and then when they finally move out, several years later, they'll get all that accrued interest paid back to them. And yes, you can keep an administrative fee, all right? Typically, it's 1% of the earnings. You can keep that for administrative purposes, all right? So in any case, if you want to read more about that, go to your state's landlord or tenant law and look up security deposits. It'll tell you more. I just want to give you some basics here tonight, okay? All right, let me make sure I covered all the basics there on deposits. 2 years interest. This is important, right? Let's say you kept some or all of a deposit, all right? And your tenant takes you to court, and the judge finds in favor of the tenant. They can actually claim up to 3 times of the amount of the deposit. It's called treble damages. Treble means triple. So if security deposit in question is $1,000, and you find yourself in a courtroom with a judge and a tenant, and a judge sees it in a tenant's favor, he might award them 3 times the amount of deposit. Pretty stiff penalty, all right? All right, now before I get into pets, let me double check for questions here, because I know some people are concerned about deposits. If you're looking to manage properties for other people, guys, you need to be concerned about deposits, right? Okay, let me double check here and see what we have on questions. Okay, this is Natasha. Hi, Natasha. How you doing? Glad to see you're online. Good evening, Gary. In lieu of a security deposit, can a landlord have a non-refundable move-in fee? I would want to do both, actually, Natasha. And I did that at one point in time. I collected a deposit. I also collected a move-in fee, a move-in processing fee, and also a lease renewal fee. Okay, it's non-refundable. Now, we made it a half month's rent. That's what ours was. We started catching flack for it, not legally speaking, but the marketplace just did not support it. In other words, there were too many owners and landlords who did not do that, and it put us at a competitive disadvantage. But I will tell you this, if you want to try it, but I would not do it in lieu of a security deposit. I would do it in addition to security deposit. Okay, that's my recommendation there. But good, excellent question, by the way. I haven't seen anybody else that was doing that. It's been years. So in any case, on to pets, okay? I wanted to tell you this right out of the gate. I love animals. And I learned years ago, even though I had a no pet policy in my units, I ended up being the landlord of rental properties that had pets. It just happened. I mean, people, they understand that the lease, 3 months later, the nice young lady gets a brand new boyfriend. He does something stupid and decides to make up for it by buying her a brand new little puppy dog or kitty cat. And neither one of them thought to check their lease or remember that that's part of the lease that they can't have pets. So they just bring in the little puppy dog and a kitty cat, and they don't think to get them fixed, spayed, or neutered, and the thing starts spraying and peeing everywhere, and you got a problem on your hands. So what I decided to do was to allow pets, but I was going to make money on it. Okay, and here's what I did. I would have a separate deposit for the lease with a separate deposit agreement. I would have an addendum for the pet for additional rent. So I would charge deposit and I would charge extra rent, okay, for the pet. And I would do that for every single pet. And then what happened is, this is the best part. I would actually advertise pets allowed, or pet policy, pets allowed, and put an asterisk to say pet policy available for review upon request. And what happened is I ended up getting better pet owners, because the better pet owners were thrilled to find a place that actually allowed pets, and the better pet owners expected to pay extra deposit. They expected to pay additional rent. They were glad to do it, and they ended up being really good pet owners. For the most part, they would take care of the pets, take them outside, keep the litter box clean, take them for walks, keep them properly groomed and spayed and neutered and treated for fleas and ticks, all that kind of stuff. And have them trained. They were just basically better pet owners. So I collected more income as a result of it, and I actually had fewer problems. And I had so much additional income and deposits on hand that when there was an occasional problem, I was more than well compensated. And it was basically like an insurance policy that everybody paid into, and from time to time I would have to fork out from that extra funds to pay for carpeting. But I had so many people paying extra rents for pets and extra deposits. I never had a problem. I never had to dig into anything to replace a carpet. I had plenty of funds on hand to do it as a result. So you can read all about it. You can read all about it in this book if you want to, but you'll see my basic philosophy on pets. I know some of you are still shaking your heads. No, 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 no pets. Just don't be surprised sometime if you find yourself with pets. Okay, let's check for questions here because I know I just ruffled some feathers there. Let's see, Fassel, how much extra would you charge? Good question, Fassel. So what I would do is I would charge an extra $100 per room for deposit. So if I had a one-bedroom apartment, it was living room, kitchen, bedroom, I would charge $300 extra for the deposit. And then as far as rents go, I would get an average of $25 per month per pet. Now, cats are always 25, small dogs are 25, but if a dog was over 25 pounds, say 25 to 50 pounds, I would make it an extra, 35, $40 a month. And if it was like a big dog, 50 pounds or more, I would make it like $75 a month, okay? I would also tell them, remember, pets are not a protected class. The only time a pet, an owner is a protected class when it relative to pets is if they have a service animal. Then you can't discriminate against people with service animals, service pets. But if they're not service pets, you can do anything you want with these deposits and extra rents. But in any case, back to what I was saying is my rule was on dogs is they couldn't have a 185-pound St. Bernard if they were renting a third-floor studio apartment. That's just not fair to the dog. It's just ridiculous. It's not reasonable. So if they were on the first floor and they had plenty of room and access to a backyard, yep, they could have a big dog. Other than that, if they're on the third floor, it's nothing but kitties and small dogs, okay? So you have to be reasonable about what you allow in your apartments, and you can do that. Again, remembering that some people do have service dogs and or service animals, and you have to account for that. So this is all in our material too, Fassel. So, if you have an interest in that, just obviously let us know. When we do that special session here in a couple of weeks, we'll probably give you guys a lot of that stuff. Just give it to you for starters, all right? All right, let me drag my panel back over, and let's see what else we got going on here. Hang on one second. Pets. I think the next thing is smokers, and I think we're clear on questions. Smokers. Okay. Another similar circumstance. I'd always would have in my leases non-smokers. We did not rent to smokers. Smokers are not a protected class. You don't have to rent to any smoker. Even if they have a disability, you can tell them if they smoke that you don't rent to them because they're smokers. It has nothing to do with their disability, right? But here's the problem with smokers. Man, some of them smoke so heavily that the nicotine not only will get into the drapery and the carpeting and the furniture, the smell, but it actually will stain the walls. The nicotine literally will stain the walls. And the odor, believe it or not, will seep into like if you have plaster or drywall material, anything that's remotely porous. If it penetrates, man, you're going to have a heck of a time getting that out. Not only the smell, but of course the discoloration. So, we had one guy one time, we literally had to, he was an apartment building I bought. The guy was in there for like 30 years. And he finally had to go to a nursing home. We went in there, and the walls were so stained with nicotine, stained yellow. We tried bleaching, priming. We literally had to paint the walls black and prime them all the way back to white before we could paint again. It was that crazy. We literally had to rip out all the carpeting and, of course, the padding, and to get down to the floor, we had to sand it down, and bleach and prime and paint the floors again before we could recarpet. It was that bad. So what we did was he said, you know what? We rent to people. We tell them no smoking policy. Some of them end up smoking anyways, or they have guests that smoke, burn the hole in the carpet, all kinds of stuff happens. So you know what we did? We decided to have a smokers policy. We said in the ads, our marketing, smokers allowed. And people apply because they're smokers. Say, I can't believe this. Nobody allows smoking. You guys allow smoking. That's great. And I'll say, it is great. Here's how we make it great. Here's our smokers policy. Extra deposit, extra rent. And now you got them. If they want the apartment, they got to pay the extra deposit and extra rent. Okay. And you tell them that, they have to keep the place clean, aired out, and refreshed, and they're going to be responsible. In this case, you're not only going to collect an extra deposit because they're smokers, but you'll tell them if that extra deposit does not cover the cost of carpet cleaning and priming and all that, you'll have to keep some of the regular indemnity clause deposit or the damages deposit for that, because technically it's damages. So in any case, that's my policy on renter on the smokers, guys. Let me drag my panel back over real quick. Hang on one second. I think that's all I'm going to cover tonight. Protected classes. Here's what I want to do on protected classes, guys. I want you guys to read your own protected classes in your own states, okay? There is obviously this federal law based on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where you can't discriminate against anybody based on, race, national origin, religion, sex, age, familiar status, which is if they're married or not, or disability. Okay, some states have added others in there. All right, but that's the basic act from 1964. What that means is you can't refuse to rent an apartment or a rental to somebody because of either of these reasons. Okay, matter of fact, the one reason that will never be deemed wrong is financial reasons. The only reason you should never rent a rental to anybody is because of financial reasons. You shouldn't never refuse an apartment or rental to anybody because of any of these other reasons. I mean, I can tell you from experience, I've been doing this for 30 years with hundreds and thousands of apartments that I own and under manage myself. And it comes down to a couple things here. Do they have the financial ability to afford that rental? Okay. And do they have something in their criminal background that will prevent you from renting them? Short of that, if they've got a good rental history, I don't care where they came from. All right, if they have a good rental history and they have a good job history, and if they have a good, public record history, I'm going to rent to them. All right, and you should too. So you'll learn that if you do otherwise, I promise you're going to learn to be a better business person through the school of hard knocks, because you're eliminating a lot of good people out there who could become good tenants of yours. In any case, that's protected classes, and that's the last thing I wanted to show you tonight. Maintenance and repairs. We'll cover another time. It's not that big a deal. Basically, when you manage properties for other people, you have to manage contractors, plumbers, electricians, roofers, carpeting people, painters, you name it. And you have an obligation to get the best work done for the least amount of money. And that's really what all that section comes down to. So let me bring my panel back over. Let's see if you guys have any questions here before we wrap things up. Let's see. Fassel says, great class. Well, you're welcome, Fassel. I appreciate your comments. Okay, and Jackie says, are we getting this information for us to keep and print? Yeah, I'm going to give you. So Jackie, if one of you guys could email Beverly and say, Beverly, Gary said you're going to give us all the book. I don't think I told her that last week. Normally she just reads my mind and knows it based on the subject. I tend to give everything away for free, but all of you have access to this, and I want you all to have it. There is a link you can go to if you go to the website. I believe if you go into the student section, some of you have to wait to the end of the month to get in there. The membership section. You can download this stuff for free. All the books we have that at least I've written or I have access to for free, I give them to you guys for free. So the only thing I can't do that for is the training programs, although you do get training programs half price. In fact, I'll tell you, for those of you who have a strong interest in property management, just be part of that special session we'll do here in several weeks, and we'll take you through the program. We'll get you up and running and get you in the property management, making some money on that too. Okay. In any case, thanks guys for being part of tonight. I look forward to seeing you all again. And Rhonda, I can't wait to get back out there. I know it's going to be the second half of February. We've already got that nailed down. The only other possibility is I might be going to Northern California, Rhonda, between now and Christmas to speak at one of my market centers up there. They keep asking me to come back, and we're going to do a board level event. I also have started speaking at the RIA groups again. So I'm going to come out there if you want, Ron. I'll speak at your local RIA group, and I want to help you launch your own, by the way, while we're at it. So keep that in mind. And Rhonda, you make me homemade apple pie, I'll probably be out there sooner. All right. You guys take care. I will see you. By the way, next week is going to be, I believe it's going to be Thursday. Yeah, next Thursday, the 29th. And by the way, what we're going to do on the 29th, guys, is I thought we'd go over some of the worksheets, the cash flow worksheet, the opportunity evaluator, the rental property reporter, the ARV, the MAO. We've had a lot of questions on that, and I thought, well, maybe it's time to go over that. But again, let me know what it is you want to talk about, and we'll do that. And I love the input, and I love the feedback, and I love the questions. Let's see, we got one more. Arana says, "Okay, sounds good. I'm a great cook." All right. Well, we've got something to hold each other to the fire. Then that sounds good. Okay, guys. God bless you. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and I will see you next Thursday. Take care. Bye bye.